Regina Capel.
What a mess. Yesterday was a gong show at the bottom of a dumpster fire, wrapped up in a cluster. The finance minister resigns, the prime minister hides all day and then has to beg his MPs not to fire him. But the worst news, buried underneath it all, was a devastating gut punch to Canadian taxpayers. A $62 billion deficit smashing through the already insane $40 billion guardrail. Canada is a serious G7 NATO partner staring down the threat of 25% tariffs. We deserve a strong leader with a new mandate. Why not let Canadians decide by calling a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister of Finance and Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I want to start by thanking the Opposition House Leader for his heartfelt congratulations on my new role. I want to tell him, Mr. Speaker, and all Canadians, that our government is very proud of the fall economic statement that we made public yesterday. Mr. Speaker, the fall economic statement speaks to growth in the Canadian economy. It speaks to supporting Canadians with serious affordability challenges. It speaks to a declining debt to GDP ratio, the best in the G7. And Mr. Speaker, we haven't finished supporting Canadians, something the Conservatives aren't interested in doing.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Member for Regina Capel.
Well, I'd like to congratulate the new finance minister for being the fourth finance minister in a 24-hour period. But it's the same old talking points. What they did yesterday was smash through that $40 billion guardrail. What does that mean? It now means that Canadians have to pay back all that money with interest, and 43 cents of every dollar you earn now has to go to pay the tax burden. More money to bankers and bondholders. In fact, the government's now spending more on the interest on that debt than on health care. But the Prime Minister doesn't care. He doesn't worry about where the money comes from. He's never had to worry about that. So why not let Canadians decide their future by calling a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister of Finance and Intergovernmental Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians expect their government to be focused on their economic concerns. They expect their government to be focused on the real threat that 25% tariffs across the board would mean to the Canadian economy. That's the work that our government's doing. I can report, Mr. Speaker, I had an encouraging preliminary conversation with the Foreign Affairs Minister yesterday, with the Border Czar, with Mr. Holman. We look forward to working with the incoming administration on border security, something that the fall economic statement generously supported yesterday. This is the work Canadians expect us to be focused on, and we're looking forward to doing that work.
The Honourable Member for Regina Capel.
Yeah, they were so proud of that fall budget that they tabled it in the House and then ran and hid for the rest of the day. But let's recap. The Prime Minister announced $250 checks and then had to cancel them. He announced a 2-month GST tax trick that businesses say they won't implement, and the Prime Minister now says is optional. A broken immigration system, Parliament seized with a $400 million corruption scandal, all the while 2 million food bank visits, doubled housing costs, record high consumer debt, the dollar below 70 cents, and the Prime Minister raising prices by quadrupling the carbon tax. Yes. Again, why not let Canadians decide their future by calling a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister of Finance and for Intergovernmental Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, as I said a moment ago, we're proud of the fiscal and economic record of this government. This is a record, Mr. Speaker, of supporting Canadians through the pandemic. This is a record of investing in entrepreneurship and innovation. This is a record in providing, for example, Canadians with $10 a day childcare, historic investments to speak to not only affordability issues, but growing the economy in a sustainable way. Mr. Speaker, this is work we're proud to continue to do for Canadians, and we find it unfortunate that it's the opposition that's trying to ground this House of Commons into chaos.
That's right. Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg. Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has lost the confidence of his ministers of Liberal MPs and of Canadians, but he continues to cling to power. He and his top economic advisor, Mark Carney, forced the former finance minister to blow past her already out of control $40 billion fiscal guardrail, which was already out of control, as I said, and forced her to run a whopping $62 billion deficit. This prime minister has added more to the national debt than all prime ministers before him combined. This profligate spending contributes to inflation. People are suffering. When will he call an election? The Honourable Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, the fall economic statement was tabled in the House of Commons yesterday. It is an economic statement which talks about economic growth and supporting Canadians through difficult times with a high cost of living. The economic statement also discusses our responsibility to use taxpayer money and responsibly, to spend it responsibly. And, Mr. Speaker, that is exactly what we will continue to do, all while keeping an eye on exactly what support Canadians need from their national government. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. How can we believe the new finance minister? How can we have confidence in what he is saying when yesterday he wasn't even able to answer a journalist's question, what is the national debt of Canada? Now, the former finance minister said in her letter yesterday, and this is very important, I quote, "We need to keep our fiscal powder dry today so we have the reserves that we may need for a coming tariff war. That means eschewing costly political gimmicks, which we can ill afford and which make Canadians doubt that we recognize the gravity of the moment," unquote. That was her message, the message of the former finance minister to the prime minister, who never listens to anyone. Call an election now. The Honourable Minister of Finance and Intergovernmental Affairs. Mr. Speaker, our colleague has mentioned the government's deficit, but he knows that our debt to GDP ratio is declining, and we have the lowest debt to GDP ratio of all G7 countries. My colleague also knows that this government will support Canadians through difficult times. We've helped with $10 a day daycare. We've helped with the dental care program. Conservatives, in fact, voted against all of these programs. This is the time to support Canadians. We will continue to do so, and we will do so responsibly, as always. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, I do congratulate the new Minister of Finance on his appointment. That said, there have been crises shaking this government for a long time, just crisis after crisis. Now there is a bad economic statement. We have a huge deficit. We also have money that the government should not have given out, that it cannot recoup. Now we need to be strong in negotiating with the United States in the context of a significant political and economic crisis. How can this government still think it has the authority and legitimacy to do so? The Honourable Minister of Finance and Intergovernmental Affairs. Mr. Speaker, I thank the Bloc Québécois leader for his congratulations. Our government is legitimate because our government has the confidence of the House of Commons. The House gave the government its confidence several times last week. As the Bloc Québécois leader said, we are still prioritizing supporting Canadians through tough times. We are also focusing on working with the Trump administration, which will come into office in January. We will work with them to reduce or even eliminate the threat of tariffs. We will protect our borders, and we will ensure that our economy succeeds and thrives. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. The government does not have the confidence of this House. It does not enjoy the confidence of the House. It enjoys the NDP's weakness. That said, if the government feels legitimate in negotiating on Canada's behalf in a potentially very dire crisis for Canada, then why doesn't the government seek the support and confidence of Canadians with this leader or with another? In January, that can happen in January. They need the support of Canadians. And if they don't have it, then bye-bye. The Honourable Minister of Finance and Intergovernmental Affairs. Mr. Speaker, once again, Canadians expect that their federal government, working, of course, with provincial governments, work hard to protect the economy from the threat of tariffs. That's exactly what we have done since the dinner we had with President Trump in Florida. I must inform colleagues, Mr. Speaker, that I had some very encouraging and positive exchanges with Mr. Leitnick, Secretary of Commerce. Yesterday, as I said, we spoke with Mr. Holman, who is responsible for the borders. They're very open-minded, and I find it very positive. We will continue this good work.
For Burnaby South.
People are right to be angry. We've got a Prime Minister who's more interested in protecting his own job than he is in protecting Canadians against a threat.
I'm going to ask the honourable members, in particular the honourable member from Miramichi Grand Lake and the member from Dufferin Caledon, please, to not take their voices. I'm going to invite the honourable member from Burnaby South to start his question again.
People are right to be angry. They've got a Prime Minister who's more interested in protecting his own job than defending Canadians against Trump. We've got a Prime Minister who has failed to defend workers from rich CEOs that the Conservatives love, who continue to rip off Canadians and drive up the cost of food and homes. The Prime Minister has failed. For New Democrats, it's always workers first and not CEOs. And not CEOs who the Conservatives want to defend. So will the Prime Minister acknowledge he has failed? He has to quit. Yeah.
Order, please. The honourable minister, and leader of the government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this House voted in confidence of this government just last week on multiple occasions. Mr. Speaker, we have important work to do on behalf of Canadians. We have a very important relationship to manage with the United States at a pivotal time, Mr. Speaker, and that is exactly what this government is focused on doing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.